They stepped onto the plane, their boarding passes in hand, ready for a smooth flight. A black couple dressed sharply heading to their first-class seats they paid for. But before they could even sit down, it happened. A sudden shift in tone, a sharp glare from the flight attendant, and then, the words, "Pull. Cutting. You don't belong here." The air grew thick, whispers spread like wildfire, and all eyes turned toward them. A moment of disbelief. A moment of humiliation. A moment that revealed more than just a seat assignment, it exposed something far uglier. Before we go any further, comment below where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe. What if everything you believed about privilege and power was about to be turned upside down? Today's story isn't just about an act of racism, it's a narrative that challenges our deepest assumptions about identity, authority, and justice. A routine flight. A black couple, successful, accomplished, excited for their journey. But within seconds, dignity is stripped away. Not because they did anything wrong. Not because they didn't belong. But because of who they were and who someone else thought they were. The air grew tense. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances. The flight attendant's voice, sharp and dismissive, cut through the cabin. "First class is for premium passengers only." What happens next will shake the very foundation of power and privilege. Just when you think you understand this story, the truth will flip the script entirely. But this isn't just about one moment. It's about a system designed to keep power in certain hands, to keep doors closed to some while welcoming others with open arms. This is about centuries of prejudice condensed into one fateful confrontation, a moment that represents something far bigger than two people on an airplane. And when the truth finally comes out, no one, not the passengers, not the crew, not even the flight attendant, could have predicted what would happen next. Stay with us because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you speechless. It began as a routine flight, boarding passes scanned, overhead compartments clicked shut, passengers settling in. But what happened next defied expectations. This wasn't just an uncomfortable encounter. This was a moment that laid bare an unsettling truth about privilege, bias, and the silent assumptions that dictate who belongs where. The couple, Marcus and Renee, had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. They were seasoned travelers, accustomed to luxury, used to being treated with the same respect as any other paying customer. But the moment they stepped onto the plane, something felt off. The flight attendant at the entrance barely glanced at them. She greeted the couple behind them with a warm smile, but when Marcus handed over their boarding passes, her expression stiffened. A flicker of something, doubt, irritation, crossed her face before she spoke. "These are first-class seats. You must be mistaken." Marcus was taken aback. He exchanged a quick look with Renee before responding. "Yes, we know. These are our seats." He gestured toward the ticket, his voice calm but firm. The flight attendant exhaled sharply. "I'm going to need to verify this," she said, her tone clipped. But she wasn't checking the tickets. She was scanning their faces as if searching for a reason they shouldn't be there. Renee, always one to give people the benefit of the doubt, forced a polite smile. "We can show you our confirmation if that helps." She reached into her purse, but before she could pull out her phone, the attendant cut her off. "There's no need. I'll handle it." For the next few moments, the air in first class grew thick with unspoken words. Passengers shuffled in their seats, stealing glances at the couple who had yet to be seated. A businessman adjusted his tie, pretending not to watch. A woman with a toddler whispered something to her partner, eyes flickering toward Marcus and Renee before quickly looking away. Marcus's patience began to wear thin. "Ma'am, is there an issue?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. How could such a grave injustice hide behind a veil of power? How does unconscious bias operate even in spaces where it should have no place? What does this say about the very nature of privilege and the assumptions we make about authority? Think about it. Would the flight attendant have even looked twice at a white man in a suit? Would she have questioned his legitimacy? Or would she have welcomed him, offered him a drink, made him feel comfortable in a space that was already designed for his acceptance? What we're seeing here isn't just an incident, it's a reflection of a system. A system that decides who is worthy before they even open their mouth. But don't just take our word for it. Let's break this moment down with experts who have spent years studying bias, power, and systemic discrimination. What we're witnessing here is what we call perceived positional legitimacy. The assumption that certain people, based on race, gender, or class, are either entitled to or undeserving of certain privileges. It's unconscious for many, but the impact is undeniable, said a man also in the plane. "I worked in the airline industry for over a decade and I can tell you, This is not rare. I've seen black passengers questioned about their seats more times than I can count. It's not official policy, but it's the unspoken reality of the industry, a former airline employee said. This incident isn't just about a mistake, it's about accountability. The flight attendant's immediate assumption was rooted in a historical precedent of exclusion, and when the truth came out, it was too late. The damage had already been done, a civil rights attorney said. So what happens next? Does the flight attendant apologize? Does the airline take action? Or does this moment get swept under the rug like so many others before it? Because while Marcus and Renee had the power to flip the narrative, most people don't. And trust me, you won't believe what happens next. The cabin had fallen silent. Every passenger, every crew member, every witness to what had just unfolded, stunned. The weight of the revelation pressed down on the flight like an invisible force. The flight attendant, once so sure of her authority, stood frozen, eyes darting between Marcus and Renee, her mind racing for an escape. But there was none. Because now, the truth was out, and there was nowhere to hide. The senior flight attendant who had dismissed Marcus's boarding pass so easily, who had tried to make them feel like they didn't belong, had unknowingly insulted the very people who could decide the future of her career. And that's when Marcus spoke. "Is there a problem, miss?" She swallowed hard, but her voice betrayed her. I wasn't aware. I didn't realize." Her words crumbled under the weight of her own actions. And the silence that followed? It spoke louder than anything else. What happens when a power dynamic is exposed for what it truly is? When bias is laid bare in front of an audience that can no longer pretend not to see? Because in that moment something else started to shift, something subtle but undeniable. The passengers who had remained silent, the ones who had looked away as Marcus and Renee were humiliated, suddenly their eyes were wide open. One by one, people in the cabin started murmuring. The shame wasn't just on the flight attendant anymore, it was on everyone who had let it happen. And in today's world, where every injustice has the potential to go viral, this was about to become much, much bigger than a single flight. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The weight of his status, his intelligence, his quiet power, it did all the talking. "Would you like to check our credentials again? Or do we still not look the part?" The senior flight attendant's face was pale now. There was no excuse. No way to deflect. No corporate script to fall back on. This wasn't about a misunderstanding anymore, it was about a fundamental failure to see black success without suspicion. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Passengers were pulling out their phones. The confrontation had been recorded, and the internet was about to do what it does best, expose the truth to the world. Within minutes, the outside world knew. And within hours, the airline was trending for all the wrong reasons. And yet, the question remained, would the airline take real responsibility? Or would this just be another PR-controlled apology, another attempt to sweep discrimination under the rug? As the plane touched down, the weight of what had happened settled over everyone. The airline was now under pressure to respond. The world was watching. And Marcus and Renee? They had no intention of letting this moment go unnoticed. But here's the real question. What would have happened if Marcus and Renee weren't the owners? If they were just another black couple without power or wealth? Would anyone have spoken up? Would the airline have apologized? Would justice have been served? Or would this moment have faded into the background, another incident that no one ever heard about because no one cared enough to listen? This isn't just one story. This is a pattern. A pattern that plays out in airports, hotels, restaurants, boardrooms, schools. A pattern that tells black people they don't belong, even when they do. A pattern that only changes when we demand accountability. So now we ask you, what will you do when you see injustice? Will you stay silent? Or will you speak up? If you made it this far, you know this is bigger than one moment. Hit the like button if you believe in justice. Subscribe if you refuse to let these stories go unheard. And turn on notifications, because trust us, this isn't the last time we'll need to talk about this. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and never stop demanding what's right.